Before I begin, I want you to imagine something. Picture a doctor. What do they look like? Chances are you imagined someone calm, composed, certain. Someone who never hesitates, never shakes, and never lets emotion interrupt their work. But today, I want to talk about the cost of that image. The cost of what I like to call the illusion of the invincible healer. It was the summer of 2016. I was sitting in the passenger seat, legs bouncing with excitement. My camp bag was stuffed. Camp felt like freedom. Friends, laughter, and a week untouched by responsibility. My grandpa was driving me. To me, he was solid, steady, one of those people who seemed immune to weakness. He belonged to a category my mind hadn't yet associated with illness. Halfway through the drive, he slowed down. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then, he pulled over abruptly, opened the door, and leaned forward. And suddenly, he was throwing up. Not quietly, not briefly, but violently. I remember freezing, my excitement evaporating in seconds. I searched desperately for explanations that felt safe. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was food poisoning. Something temporary, something fixable. Because this couldn't mean anything serious. He wiped his mouth, waved it off, and smiled. "Don't worry. I'm fine." "I'm fine," he said. The kind of reassurance adults give children to protect them from fear. But something had shifted. That moment followed me to camp, replaying late at night when the noise died down. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. Something fragile had cracked. When I came home, I finally allowed myself to see what I had been avoiding. My grandpa hadn't changed overnight. The illness had been there all along. I was only just starting to see it. His skin looked duller, his shoulders slooped forward, and his body moved as though he was rationing energy. Weeks passed, he grew weaker. And one afternoon, it was clear we couldn't wait any longer. So my dad and I took him to the hospital. Things escalated quickly after that. Blood was drawn, tests were ordered, numbers were whispered. Then, a doctor sat us down. I didn't understand every term, but I understood the silence that followed afterwards. The silence that made it clear that something was wrong. My grandpa's white cell count was dangerously low. Low enough to raise alarms. Low enough that we were told he needed to see an oncologist. The diagnosis came soon after. My grandpa was diagnosed with cancer, specifically leukemia. From that moment on, the hospital became his home. Days blurred together, ivy poles followed him like shadows. I visited my grandpa in the hospital quite often, and over time, the illusion began to reveal itself. The doctors caring for my grandpa were competent, technically excellent, precise, but they spoke as though my grandpa's body existed separately from his fear. They talked to him, not with him. They delivered information without acknowledgement. They moved efficiently, almost mechanically. And I remember thinking something that unsettled me deeply. How can someone witness this much suffering and feel so untouched by it? At the time, I thought the problem was a lack of empathy. But I've since realized it was something more complex. The illusion of the invincible healer isn't about ill intent. It's about protection. The practice of medicine exposes healers to constant human suffering, and loss does not wait for recovery. So healers learn, consciously or not, they learn to build armor. Distance becomes safety. Pulling back emotionally becomes a way to function. The illusion forms when that armor is mistaken for strength. Many people believe that clinical care requires appearing unshaken, that professionalism means emotional silence, that empathy is optional, even dangerous. And slowly, the healer becomes invincible. or at least appears to be. But invincibility comes at a cost, because when the healer becomes untouchable, the patient becomes invisible. Years later, that truth returned to me, this time through my father. It was another summer afternoon. My dad was outside taking down our very high basketball net. He was on a tall ladder that seemed stable until it wasn't. I wasn't watching, no one was, until a neighbor walking her dog stopped suddenly. She found my dad unconscious on the driveway. She quickly dialed 911. By the time we understood what had happened, sirens were already cutting through the air. Paramedics moved fast. They were practiced, efficient, certain. A neck brace, a stretcher, short commands spoken without hesitation. My dad still did not regain consciousness. My mom and I followed the ambulance, every red light stretching unbearably long. In the emergency department, everything felt harsh. The lights too bright, the sounds too loud. My dad lay immobilized, confused when he finally opened his eyes. He kept repeating himself, forgetting mid-sentence. And I stood there, shaking, watching the strongest person I knew suddenly made helpless. Doctors and nurses came in and out. They discussed imaging, they reviewed vitals, they spoke in acronyms and protocols. And again, that same hollow feeling. No one explained things in a way we could grasp. No one acknowledged the fear sitting thick in the room. At one point, nurses walked in laughing, mid-conversation, as if the weight of the moment hadn't crossed the threshold with them. I felt invisible, not just unseen, but erased. And suddenly, I understood something profound. This wasn't indifference. This was the illusion at work. The invincible healer, untouched, unaffected, protected by emotional distance. But while the healer remained composed, the family unraveled. Here's the paradox at the heart of this illusion. The very thing meant to protect healers is what separates them from the people they are trying to heal. Patients don't need invincibility. They need presence. They need to know that the person standing at the foot of the bed understands that this moment matters. When composure becomes a shield, it creates distance instead of trust. Care begins to feel impersonal. And in that distance, medicine gives up something deeply valuable. It's humanity. My name is Joy Maasarani, and I'm a second-year medical student. I'm learning the science of medicine, pathways, mechanisms, diagnosis. But the most important lesson I've learned didn't come from a lecture. It came from watching my grandpa disappear behind a diagnosis. It came from watching my dad become a head injury. Healing is not just about treating the disease. It's about recognizing personhood. So what do we do? The answer is not to abandon professionalism, not to drown in emotion, not to carry every loss alone. The answer is intentional humanity. Here are 3 small but powerful shifts. First, pause. Before you speak, before you chart, before you leave the room. Second, acknowledge, not the disease, but the emotion behind it. A simple, I can see how overwhelming this feels. Third, remember. Remember who this person is to someone else. To you, this may be one patient, but to someone else, this is a grandparent, a parent, a whole world. I'll leave you with this. Medicine does not lose its power when we allow ourselves to heal. It gains something far more essential. When we let go of the illusion of the invincible healer, we don't become weaker. We become present. And in moments like the ones I've shared with you, presence is what patients remember. Presence is what families hold on to. And presence is where healing truly begins. When you imagine yourself in that bed, who do you want standing there? Invincibility or humanity? Thank you.
With that being said, we are now done.